Hi, I'm Abhishek Rungta, founder and CEO of INT, and this is I Love Technology podcast. The purpose of I Love Technology podcast is to find a balance between practicality and possibility of technology. Here I'm inviting guests who have been industry experts, who have been technology experts, and trying to discover how technology can really make impact and how it can really drive change in the world, and ideas that businesses can take and apply to get ROI from their businesses. Hi, welcome Bharat.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and being part of this podcast.
My pleasure, Abhishek. All my pleasure. Thank you.
So, Bharat Gera is one of the authority in IT when it comes to healthcare. And I have been fortunate to interact with him, engage with him, and learn from him about how IT is and should be utilized in healthcare industry. So I've invited him to discuss and find out how healthcare businesses should use IT and how their technology adoption should happen and what will actually help them transform and create value for their end customers. That's my core objective. And for this, not for the sake of IT, not for the sake of technology, but for the sake of outcomes. That is the objective of I Love Technology podcast, where we try to dig deep and find insights that these businesses can use to really create impact.
Wonderful. Yeah.
But so though I think the first point that I wanted to discuss was I see, at least as a perception, that healthcare is one of those industries which is lagging behind in terms of technology adoption or AI adoption, at least when I see in the Indian market. Is this just a perception or is this a truth? And if it is, then why?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And, calling me an authority on this subject because I've been around for a long time doesn't even qualify me for being achieving more on the transformation. But at some point I thought I was the only one struggling to get this industry to transform over several years, or many of us who were in this industry were struggling. But even the others who've come in recent times have struggled. And the reason is that there's a lot of regulation and legacy and many other factors which are not applicable to other industries. So it is definitely a laggard due to various reasons. It's changing fast though.
Is it because of the lack of investment that healthcare industry earmarks for technology? I ask you this because in other regulated industries where I have worked, which is insurance, banking, pharma, they have adopted to a great extent. And I see the digital transformation in a much advanced stage in many of these organizations compared to healthcare industry. So what are your thoughts on that?
So definitely there is a competition for the budget, which is usually not taken up towards IT, because the other claimants for the budget have much bigger stake in the value of the business. So biomedical technology, which is also very advanced technologies for laboratory testing, for imaging, those are very advanced technologies, but those get the budget share. But information technology as such is not seen as a priority, and that's why it doesn't get the budget in healthcare often. You're right.
But do you see a proper investment in technology will drive sufficient value for healthcare industry?
So does it drive value? Definitely it does drive value. Sometimes the value is difficult to, reach a number to. Let's talk about, say, things like improvement in clinical outcomes.
Okay.
It's very difficult to show that, a clinical outcome resulted in more increased RPOB or EBITDA for the hospital. It definitely has an impact on the value delivered to the patient.
Okay.
But it doesn't necessarily result in that kind of a financial outcome for the hospital. So that is why there is a question mark about various investments that are made in IT. That do they really deliver the value which is most relevant, which is the clinical outcome for the hospital?
Got it. So what I can understand from this point that you made is that somewhere there is a break in the value chain. This means that the value that the hospital or the healthcare provider is delivering to the customer, there the value is not getting captured when they spend on technology. Even if the outcome is improved, you can't charge more because I am delivering a better outcome.
Exactly.
And therefore, they find it very difficult to justify that investment in technology beyond a point.
Exactly.
Unless it's a completely path-breaking technology, like, where you bring a new medical treatment altogether, which I don't call a IT, which is more of medical science related innovation.
Yes, absolutely. But having said that, things are changing rapidly in this field right now. So in the last 2 years, since we did a study on the Indian hospitals digitization, there has been a significant increase in the level of digitization in hospitals. And the next 2-3 years look very, very positive in terms of improvement in digital maturity, being able to get return on investment for the technology investments that are done, and step up on the budgets. I'm seeing it all around.
So I also see that there's a lot of fragmentation in terms of technology providers in the healthcare industry. If you talk about the core systems or systems which provide a specific function, I do not see clear market leaders yet. Is there any particular reason behind it, or is it just that way it has evolved in the market?
Yes, there is a lot of fragmentation. In fact, that is the reason most of the global players do not want to enter the Indian market at all. And from a decision maker point of view also, it is very difficult to differentiate between the offerings that are available in the market. If you take an HIS EMR, there are literally hundreds of them around.
Yeah.
And none of them is of any scale that is significant for an ERP player. This is driven by two factors. One is that it is relatively easier to build the applications.
Okay.
And the other is that the each hospital believes, for whatever reason, that they have very custom and proprietary needs. And that is driven by the fact that this industry doesn't have that level of business process engineering that is available in other industries. So the process flows are very different across facilities. And nobody has done until now very extensive work on detailed process flows for all aspects, operational, clinical, patient experience aspects into an ERP software. What has typically been done in these HIS solutions which are there, and the large number of them that are there, is that they are essentially billing systems.
Okay.
So they have very limited scope.
Got you.
Right.
Yeah. So you have seen that companies and hospitals, both the technology provider as well as hospitals, are not really thinking through the touch points of the consumer. Obviously, there must be standardized processes in the clinical part of things. So once you get into the OT, or once you get into the, maybe patient goes into the room, there might be processes which are like clinical processes that has to be followed by a checklist or a process flow. But as a business of the hospital, the process standardization is quite poor. And as you rightly said, people think that their process is unique and they are doing something very different, which cannot be covered by a standard software.
True. Even the clinical pathways, each specialist, each doctor tends to believe that they have the right pathway. So even when you bring a product into the market, you have to be willing to customize it according to the specific requirements that they have.
Okay.
So that's why it's almost like a services job than a product development.
Right. So it basically becomes more a service business, because you basically provide a piece of software and then there is a lot of service that you have to deliver on top of it.
Exactly.
Okay. Excellent. So now, given the equation of the technology part, how is AI coming into it? Because the base technology seems to be little shaky at this point. And obviously, AI is a big disruption as we see. How do you see AI's impact in the overall healthcare market at this point in time?
So one of the areas there where AI is definitely coming in a big way is anything to do with patient experience, or rather conversion of opportunities.
Okay.
We're talking about CRM, and
Okay.
we're talking about related to customer, anything in the customer journey, from the customer acquisition, the customer retention, the customer monetization, and the customer advocacy. These areas, there is considerable use of AI coming in, right from the responses that a system can send out on its own, or prompt the customer agent to send the responses, and things like reminders to get the scan done in time have evolved, where there's a lot of not just reminder services but discovery of the care gaps. So there's a lot of interesting work going on that.
That's interesting. Would you like to talk about few interesting small use cases that you have seen where technology and AI is together creating differentiated customer experience?
Oh yeah, sure. I've seen some very interesting ones related to triage.
Okay.
So I'll talk from personal experience, and I know this is a leading hospital in India which is doing this implementation with a small startup which has got an AI-based product. What they do is that, suppose you want to consult a doctor X, and you fixed up an appointment, you first engage with this agent.
Okay.
And this agent takes in all your information, your previous reports, your previous scans, and summarizes this before you go and consult the doctor. Now, usually we call this an intake process, patient intake process. And this process takes up a lot of time for what are called physician assistants to these clinicians. The hospital could be saving anything from half an hour to 1 hour for every consult by doing this activity, and making it very convenient for the patient as well. And they're optimizing on the consultant's time also being spent, and increasing the accuracy of the consult also, because AI would capture most of the details which need to be presented to the consultant. That's one very smart use case I've seen.
This is like very close to what I used to think, and I still think the best use of AI in the initial phase is AI as assisted intelligence.
Yes.
Where it basically augments your time, effort, and improves the place where you should put your effort.
Yes.
Or helps you put your effort in the right place.
Yes.
Where your specialization is required, rather than take away the time from things which are not that much important in your profession.
That's true. There's also another extensive use of AI which is happening, which I call the gray usage of AI.
Okay.
See, in a formal situation, a clinician using AI is under pressure because it could be a difficult legal situation for the clinician to use, or it could be embarrassing to use in front of a patient or a relative. But clinicians are using the AI to validate their own diagnosis and their treatment plans out of curiosity, and individually extensively using these, but they can't put it into the formal systems yet, because then it becomes a system of record.
Of course.
So they're doing it in the off the record kind of usage of AI, which is very extensive. It's being used by radiologists, it's being used by physicians, and everybody.
So more like validating their own assessment, kind of a second opinion on their own outcome.
Exactly. On their treatment plans, on their diagnosis, wherever they are in doubt, they are actually using AI tools.
That's very interesting. Like, obviously nobody will talk about it in open, but at least it's good to know that it is being used. Yes. And even good to know that it is being used as a second opinion and not the first opinion or the final opinion.
Right.
Like doctors are still using their experience, understanding of the patient.
Yes.
And understanding of the treatment and possible effects, side effects, everything. And of course, their personal emotional quotient and, the relationship to drive the outcome, rather than just throw a...
what I've heard from some very well-known oncologists is that the AI actually finds and suggests great treatment plans which they might not have been able to do on their own. but they won't say that publicly, of course. But they do actually acknowledge that what's happening is awesome.
So what happens if AI takes over the treatment? So what would be the role of doctors at that point in time?
I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
Okay.
I think, you call it human in the loop or whatever you want to call it. AI has to be introduced at the right stage in the workflow, in the cycle of the entire process of diagnosis or treatment planning or, outcomes management. I don't think it can be completely autonomous. It would be too risky and not enough, scientific backing. There are a lot of evaluation studies happening, even in radiology, which is the most advanced use of AI. The autonomous radiology AI is not advised because each radiology AI, there are about 502 certified by FDA and so on, does one specific task really well. So if it is detecting lung cancer, it does that perfectly. But if you look at a case where you don't know what are the possible treatment or diagnosis, it's can be very off, and it can give sometimes totally off, completely off the target kind of responses, which are nonsensical. So you have to be very careful. The other aspect is the AI can only be as good as the data that is provided to it. And if there's missing data or data which is, dirty, you're going to get very bad outcomes from autonomous AI. A doctor who's been in practice will know to some extent that, this is missing data.
Okay.
And a lot of the missing data might be still in the doctor's head because everything doesn't get recorded.
Yeah. Or sometimes things may not correlate. So it may not show up in the report.
Yeah.
But there might be a wrong anomaly in the report.
Yeah.
And a doctor may be able to understand because the other parameters are right. And he knows that this might be an anomaly. And therefore he will not take that in record to take a decision and immediately jump on a conclusion.
Yeah.
So things like that, because even diagnostic reports cannot be considered to be 100% accurate all the time.
Right. But the missing data problem is a very extensive problem because of lack of interoperability between systems. So you may have captured data digitally in some part of the system, but given that these are legacy systems, like I said in the beginning, at the underlying as the fundamental ERP systems are legacy.
Right.
The breakdowns happen in communication between these systems. And there have been documented cases where a particular finding was not made available, and the doctor went ahead, with the wrong treatment plan.
Oh.
Now, if AI was to do that, it wouldn't know that it's happening at all, right?
True.
So,
So that's great. By the way, again, it's my suggestion and recommendation. Do not try to treat yourself using AI. Of course, it can give you some opinions, but you need to still go to a doctor to get an opinion because of certain very important points that we just discussed with Mr. Gera. So moving on, you touched upon data. What is the level of data maturity that you see in healthcare organizations at this point? Be it hospitals, be it diagnostic centers, be it care centers. What do you see?
I see that at least in India, we have very low digitization in the first place. If you talk about healthcare globally, also a lot of data is still in the physician's head.
Oh,
yes. Because the observations that a clinician makes are not just lab results or scans. They're also clinical foot to your head, as they say, right? Head to toe observations that they make. At this point, we are not capturing complete videos and complete, recordings of the patient. We don't have all that. If we're talking about EMR data, it's a lot of people say that from a clinical healthcare point of view, the EMR may only have 30 to 40% of the data which is required to actually do treatment and diagnosis. So,
and I think, when you are looking at certain a patient or a situation, right, there is a lot of neurons that's firing into a clinician's mind.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for him to document it or put it down.
Right.
So until and unless that data comes out in some format, in some form,
Right.
there is no way you can really use that or
Right.
create opinions or create treatments and stuffs like that. So maybe everything cannot be caught, but can we start capturing critical data
Right.
about patient, about the treatment, about the process?
So typically what goes on in the mind is the differential diagnosis, as we call it.
Okay.
So differential diagnosis is something that you cannot be conclusive until you try out some treatment for that diagnosis, or you observe the further development of the symptoms of the diagnosis, or you are able to perform certain tests which are able to confirm the diagnosis.
Okay.
So sometimes those tests may take a long time because it may be a culture which needs to be created. It could be a genetic test which needs to be done, which will take time to get the entire sequencing done and a heavy cost. So differential diagnosis is a method which is used by clinicians to narrow down that this may be the main call. So there's a lot of judgment involved there. And for AI to be able to do that, it needs to know far more context about the patient, their surroundings. So, for example, a clinician practicing in a particular area who's seeing a certain set of cases of fever is more likely to be able to take a better call that this is viral and not
Yeah. So that context is
bacterial.
going to be missing in many of the cases. And that is why, though data capture is important, but that data is not necessarily sufficient to take AI related decisions.
I totally believe that. I think to get to the point where AI can be autonomous or be, much more effective, we need far more data to be captured. And there, what is happening is very interesting.
Okay.
So it's not just software. I think what is happening is the sensors technology and the capability of Internet of Medical Things, or basically medical devices which are miniaturized today. And they're available at point of care. They're available at home. They're available in wards. They're able to capture so much clinical data, which now then can be used for a lot of very interesting, for example, sepsis analysis.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have this continuous stream of data coming in, you're in a much better situation to assess, for example, even at a home situation, how the patient is doing. Let's say they have had a surgery and we want to monitor their cardiac status. Earlier, the only way to do it was with expensive Holter devices. Now there are, patch worn sensors which are fairly effective in monitoring even cardiac cases.
So will be, what I understand from you is that obviously data capture through these health devices will become key in days to come for organizations to also become data driven. Because let's say if I am meeting someone and I am talking to a cardiologist to understand my heart health, I can give him my Phoenix data or my Whoop data, and he will at least know how my heart has performed over the last 6 months, under what circumstances, and then he will have a better understanding. And when this data starts residing with him on an anonymous basis, he will be having much more information to help other patients as well.
Right. That brings us to the most difficult part in digital transformation in healthcare, which is the change in behavior of the clinical teams.
Okay.
They are used to doing certain things in a certain protocol. They follow more of algorithm kind of approach, which is rule-driven algorithm.
Okay.
So the reason they will not change their behavior, a lot of people think, these guys are resistant to change. But it's not just that. They're basically averse to risk because of legal reasons and also because of the nature of the problem. They're averse to risk.
I see.
And they will not change their way of doing it until they have enough proof that the alternative works. Okay. And that is what delays all implementations. The doctors will never be early adopters of any technology which increases, say, the amount of data available or increases the velocity of data available, variety of data available. They will be slightly skeptical always in taking that data into consideration. And think of the cognitive load. If I start giving you everything for a fever diagnosis, right from gene sequencing to giving your current, vitals, and then looking at other biomarkers in your body and everything. And today, lab results also can throw up. Labs, diagnostic centers have become very cost effective in India, especially.
Yeah.
So you can have 150 lab results. Now, how is the clinician going to take all these into account and then be able to cognitively handle this? And there again, probably the only way future clinicians will be able to handle this deluge of data from a cognitive point of view is that they will have to use AI.
And again, I think they need to use, I think clinicians and health organizations need to use a data driven approach much more, because the next generation that we are seeing now with the wearables, they are educated about certain parameters and how their body is working, how their body is reacting. I have never heard people talking about VO2 as much as I have heard in the last 6 months. I have not heard about people talking about heart rate variability in the last 6 months as I have heard before. So this means people are getting used to this terminology. They are trying to understand it. They are trying to learn about their body and health through popular science books and other content. So when these people are getting to that level, of course, at times they might also irritate a doctor. But on the other side, doctor also need to step up, because he may not just be able to sit and say, okay, let me do this test. And he may say, this is my heart rate data for last 3 months. What do you want to know?
Yeah, so a lot of times even the Apple Watch has been known to give false alerts.
Okay.
And the clinicians have been complaining that we get too many of patients wrongly diagnosed. False positives are quite prevalent, and the reasoning given is that it's okay, you didn't do any harm, you went to the doctor, it was a false positive, it's all right, it didn't, but it saved so many people's lives. But practically for a provider, when I look at it from a hospital perspective, sometimes what we are seeing is that use of this technology is actually making the consult longer. You're talking about participative care where the patient comes with all this data. Now, what it means is that it's going to take so much longer for that consult to happen. So again, what I believe is that participatory requires culture change, and both the clinician and the patients have to agree on new protocols on how to review the data together.
Okay.
I have seen some clinicians do that really well, where they agree with the patient that we are going to monitor these parameters for you on this periodic basis using this tool, which we will both view together. Nice. I think measuring what matters in a protocol-driven way, which is agreed with both the parties, is the best way than having a random discussion of every biomarker that is there in your body.
Yeah, you can. From my wearable, I get at least 20 different markers.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to understand, was I okay yesterday or am I better today? Because different things say different things.
Yes.
Right? So nowadays you are also tracking the sleep. And in sleep itself, you have got 4 different markers.
Yes.
And you don't know what markers means what at a given point in time. And how is it preparing for you for the day ahead?
And what decision can you make out of it? Finally, after all that, if it says you should sleep well, you should be less stressed, you should eat less, and you should exercise more.
Yeah.
If that's the only decision that comes out of it, there's not much progress. But optimistically, I believe that it's changing the way healthcare works.
Okay.
And it'll change it faster and faster. It's only about how much the systems, the protocols, the operating systems, the people involved. More bigger problem is that how fast are the people involved in this going to adopt and change to this changing way of healthcare.
So if you have to advise a hospital who wants to become data driven tomorrow, what is the first or next step that they can take where they can at least start gathering data or whatever? What should be the next step for them that they should start doing? Let's say it's a hospital which is not a data driven. They have a very standard HIS run. They have some, just like another 100-bed hospital. And now they are saying the owner has suddenly realized I want to be a data-driven company.
The way I normally do this, and we do it at my company, is that we always start with identifying the pain points. everybody knows the pain points that they have.
Okay.
So they know that we are losing revenue because the patient is not staying back to do the lab tests with us. They know that the patient is dropping out in their journey, let's say a maternity journey. They're coming for the first diagnosis, they're not coming after that.
Okay.
So they know that they are having what are called care gaps, which are essentially revenue gaps for them.
Okay.
And once they realize that they're losing money or they can save cost, then they're more driven to put together the data that is required to plug those revenue leakages and care gaps.
So basically, we need to understand that what is the core problem for them, and if it is a revenue gap problem, then they may be like to start recording data of the patient journey and start analyzing it for loss of revenue. If it's about cost cutting, then they should start maybe analyzing and keeping data of different cost that has incurred in different times, and then maybe analyze that where we spent more money, where we could have saved a little bit.
Exactly. Now, if you look at the packages which are given by the government, most of them tend to be loss making.
Okay.
So it's a cost of loss minimization sometimes there.
Okay.
So how do you make sure that you have to do that to have capacity utilization across your hospital? So you do a lot of government cases, and there's no choice about it also in some cases. So you do a lot of the government cases, plan cases, and even if you're losing money, you try to make sure you lose the least amount of money possible so that your overall ARPOB remains somewhat good.
So that's interesting. So what I understand from you is for healthcare companies, it's important to understand what their immediate problem statement is, because that gives you the motivation to actually act and then start recording that data. And how to analyze and how do you find gaps can be done. Like, I'm sure there are data scientists, data analysts who can help you identify where things are going wrong. But that culture has to start.
Yes.
And I think the culture has to start from the point of highest motivation.
Yes.
So that it can actually get imbibed in the company and the employees and the people.
Yes. And each stakeholder has a different motive or different pain. So I think when we are trying to do these things, I try to involve a cross-functional team.
Okay.
So the nursing may have a very different problem from others. So they may be overburdened. One of the common stated problems, nurses are overburdened.
Yeah.
So they would like to use the data to cut down. I mean, they're very happy if the IoT devices are effectively deployed.
Right.
So, it should be benefiting them. It should be solving a problem for them.
Absolutely. So now coming down from data to certain compliance related things, which you said is a little bit of a friction in adoption of technology and AI within the healthcare industry. So there are standards like FHIR, standards like HL7, and all these different standards at a national level, international level. How are they gaining ground, and do they really have impact, positive or negative, in terms of digitization, data-driven culture adoption, or AI adoption in general?
So when we talk about the standards, they're necessarily used for interoperability. And interoperability, essentially, the purpose of it is to have a longitudinal patient record.
Okay.
Because if you don't have a longitudinal patient record, you really cannot make the right diagnosis or right treatment plans for a patient, not knowing, for example, very simply that what allergies they have, or whether they've heard of a scenario where a patient was treated for oncology related treatment and had a previous neurological problem which was not reported to the clinician. So these can lead to medical errors, can lead to wrong treatments. So a longitudinal record is ensured with standards only. And unfortunately in India, we've been lagging behind, but now the government has initiated a number of initiatives, including through NABH and the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. So within next 2-3 years, we'll see standards implementation.
So do you think this will be forced, or companies will see benefit of doing it? Because what I understand is that it also gives you a massive benefit in becoming a standard data-driven organization. So do you see that the business will drive this adoption, or will it be a regulatory pressure to drive the adoption of these things?
Right now, it has been regulatory, and unfortunately, that has not been that successful because the business is not able to relate to what will be the benefits of it for their business. I see the latest Digital Personal Data Protection Act, which has been introduced, will definitely be a big fear factor because there's a huge penalty of 200 crores, which also at the same time will necessitate the creation of proprietary data, data that is owned by you and not stolen from others.
Right.
So current practices are unfortunately very bad, that the data is taken from other sources without the consent of the patient.
Okay.
So now, if for example, if you want to know who's facing fertility problems, just source the data for a fertility clinic, and then you can start giving them advice based on that, or provide treatment plans based on that. It starts selling. So it's essentially for marketing,
Right,
and lead generation. Now, if that is going to stop with the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, the illegal use of it, and it has to be consent driven, it will force the organizations to look at data, to create data sets and data platforms for the internal use, which will then bring discipline across their entire.
So do you think smaller companies or smaller organizations will also be interested? Because the way I look at it, if the penalty is 200 crores and if the company doesn't have even 100 crores, I mean, they may say, rather ignore it. I mean, why the hell do we want to go and obey these rules? I mean, at least let me run my business, because obeying these rules will cost me a lot of money.
No, I think the people who have designed these regulations have a lot going behind this. It's not going to be just the penalty.
Okay.
It's going to be combination of this with the ABDM regulations, which means you will not be able to see the data.
Okay.
Right? If you are not complying, then you will not be able to see the patient's data, which will stop you from providing the service. So your business continuity will take a hit.
And I think also it will create trust, because nowadays I see the biggest challenge across every business is trust.
Yeah.
I mean, be it our own business, right?
Yeah.
Earlier, when people used to go and sell, they would be able to convince a new person to start doing business with you.
Right.
But today it needs a lot more trust to drive a closure, drive a relationship.
Absolutely. Right? Same thing in healthcare.
So I think in healthcare also, going through these regulations, and also following the protocols that the government is setting, which is for a greater good, I think it will create a lot more trust in the system.
Yes.
So they will actually grow. So the regulation is for growth as well.
Yes, totally agree.
Excellent. So I think I was just thinking around it. So good to validate it with you.
Yes.
So what do you see about the future of these care models? Like, there are a lot of new models coming in. I heard that, I don't remember the exact name of this hospital. There is a hospital chain which has come up in South India who says there is a subscription and then everything is covered under that.
I'll be on a panel with them on Friday.
Oh, really? Excellent.
You're talking about Super Health, I think.
Super Health. Yeah. Right. Super Health.
I think they're filling a gap where a lot of the existing players said the consumer experience is not important. And as long as we're giving the right clinical outcomes, we can ignore all the other aspects, or at least not be super optimized on it.
Right.
But the fact is, any feedback survey you see from patients, the first feedback is all about waiting times and the inconvenience. A lot of people don't go to hospitals and see the doctor because it's inconvenient for them. And I think by promising a consumer experience which is superior, this is a great move to shake up the industry. Whether the business model is viable or not, we'll wait to hear and see how that goes.
But I think, a lot of times, when innovation happens, they bring a change which becomes a standard change. Like, for example, 10-minute delivery. Right. So maybe many 10-minute delivery companies will die, and they will die because their fundamentals are not strong enough.
Right.
But in certain industries, it might work.
Right.
And if it works and it fulfills the human need
of
instant fulfillment of, of their needs.
Right.
I mean, in certain areas, it will work, and those areas will pick it up. And for those areas, it will become the standard.
Right.
And I think driving the same human need, they are saying if you are given an appointment of 4:30 p.m. in the evening,
Right.
you come at 4:30 p.m. and you directly go and see the doctor and then you go home.
Yeah. So it's not just the promise on the front end. I'm going to see more about this when I meet this team. But they've done a lot of work on the back end in terms of resource optimization and
Okay.
resource utilization.
I see.
So it's well backed in the sense it's not just about trying to lose money and provide cheaper
No, of course not. Like
consultation.
I'm not thinking that they are doing that by any means, right?
Right.
I think whatever I have heard and read about them, it looks they are solid.
Yeah.
And I hope they are solid.
No, leaving that one example aside, I've
Yeah.
been interacting with other hospitals like
Okay.
Arvind Eye Hospital, AIG in Hyderabad. They have cost optimized to such a degree that they can actually provide services at the same quality and clinical outcome at a much lower cost.
I see.
And the scale of operations they can do is enormous, which others cannot match.
But no, let's come to that very interesting small customer experience part, which is reducing the wait time.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science to solve that, isn't it? Or
It's
is it?
actually an NPR problem because you need very specific context information to be able to optimize, and you need the resources that are required of backend are not very easy to optimize.
Okay. Like,
Let's take the simple thing of, you have to have at least 5 types of resources available to do a simple procedure, which is done in OP,
okay.
which is the room, the clinician, the technician, the nurse, and the porter.
Okay.
Now, all these have to synchronize so that you don't have to spend more time. And there are people who have achieved that.
Okay.
And they synchronize and make these orchestrated together so that the entire time that is spent is optimized and promised and met. So that takes a lot of doing. It's
So
not
what
easy.
skill do you need to solve this? Like, this is not necessarily a clinical skill.
No, it's
This is not even
operational.
a just management skill. So what skill do you need? Like I see Indigo. I mean, except for the recent incident that happened, I mean, I was amazed the way they operate like a clockwork.
Yeah.
All of their functions work like a clockwork and you get delivery on time. Literally, you got transported from city A to city B exactly on time.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think one big disruption is due in the healthcare industry in similar line.
Yeah.
So what kind of capability you need to do that?
See, operational skills like in airlines, the same kind of skills will apply and are being applied in healthcare also by the leaders.
Okay.
The thing that makes it again difficult is that each clinical procedure is not like boarding a plane. So it's different each time.
Yeah.
So just imagine that if the Indigo was flying fighter jets and drones and bombers and everything together, then would they be able to do this kind of thing? So some of the procedures require a very different workup and process. So to succeed in healthcare, you have to be able to address this high variability across the operations. It's not a very single operating procedure for everything.
So do you think like when we talk about customer experience, eventually, even after using technology, AI and everything, super specialty hospitals will have an edge and we will have super specialty hospital for different functions eventually.
Actually, it's easier to do in single specialty hospitals.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Okay.
Single specialty hospital, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Not multi-specialty.
Okay, super specialty is the same. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not multi-specialty. Yeah. Yes, you're saying the same thing. Right. Yes. They have an edge always.
They will always have an edge.
They have an edge in terms of being able to achieve operational efficiency. Definitely.
And then there might be hospitals which are specialized for handling emergencies because then they may be extremely good in doing that. Because adding emergency, what I've seen in certain hospitals, create a very biased effort, value proposition there because a lot of energy and time and effort goes into handling emergencies and everything goes for a toss. Like if I have gone to an OPD and if there is a great doctor there whom I'm supposed to see, if an emergency patient comes in who needs that doctor right away, that doctor is scooted away. Of course, he needs to be. And I ended up waiting for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So how do you solve these problems?
Yeah. I've seen some hospitals do that and beginning to do that in the emergency.
Okay.
The resource utilization and the emergency protocols.
Okay.
I saw this very well done at a hospital in Hyderabad where the clinician doesn't have to come to the emergency immediately. He can monitor the case remotely, see all the conditions. The patient from the time they is on the ambulance is being tracked for all the vitals and visually tracked with an AI, which is tracking the physical symptoms as well.
That's a massive use of technology.
Yes.
So we are basically saying that the moment the patient gets into the ambulance of that hospital,
Yeah.
he's under the tracker,
Yeah.
and there's a specialized tracking team.
Yes.
And then if they need a specialist, the data is also streamed to his screen. So he's also monitoring him.
Correct.
While he might be looking at other patients
Correct.
in his OPD.
Correct.
And when the patient comes, if this gentleman is required to go and attend him, he will immediately go and attend him.
So
which
the
may be some of
entire
the
alert
cases.
mechanism, the status, the risk profiling, everything is being done in the system.
So how a hospital, a normal hospital gets to that point?
Intention is the first step. The
Okay, what is the first step?
technology, intention.
Okay.
I think a lot of times there's not enough intent to solve problems.
And that we are going back to the same problem, that there is not enough incentive
Exactly.
to have better clinical outcomes.
It's clear financial incentive is not there very many times.
Okay.
The impact on the patient can be great, but there's no clear financial outcome.
Why do you say so? Because if a particular hospital is giving better outcomes, right, more and more patients will like to go to that hospital instead of the other hospital.
Oh, definitely. There's a reputation. So if you look at it in the long term, if you don't look at it transactionally and you say, what is it going to mean in terms of reputation and flow of patients, your marketing costs will go down, your scaling capability will go up, you will do better, you'll be able to replicate your process to the scale that you want and everything. So definitely there's a long-term gain from this and profitability from that. It's just that people have to think about it like that.
But again, I think for a country like India, where a healthcare supply is far less than the demand, maybe this does not make a lot of sense for healthcare owners, healthcare business owners, because even if your outcome is not that great, right? Even for the best hospitals which are getting great outcome, they have limited number of beds. They will get occupied. And then the overflow has to come to the ones which does not have great outcomes. Isn't that true?
Yeah, but I think Indian healthcare system, whatever said and done, performs really well in spite of all these shortcomings. And I think the only area that they really lack on is the patient experience.
Okay.
That is the area they don't clearly see. How will that impact my revenues and how will that improve my performance? I think that realization is the one that is lacking more than the other things. Indian hospitals, actually, even the average Indian hospital does pretty well on it.
Wow, that's great. That's good to know, and it's heartening to know because at the end of the day, we all are wanted or unwanted customers for them. So we want to make sure that we are in good hands.
Right. No, from some of the recent family situations or even otherwise, I've seen the kind of performance that Indian hospitals have been doing is amazing compared to global standards as well.
Excellent. I think we uncovered some very interesting ideas about how healthcare is doing, the motivations, the challenges. We spoke about the core systems to fragmented systems to AI and data. We also spoke about standards and regulations. I think we covered quite a lot, Bharat.
Last shout out I want to give is to all these young people who are coming in. I'm an older guy, you call me an authority, but I think the younger people who are questioning the authority and saying, oh, you think it can be only done this way? No, it can be done this way better. These people who are questioning the authorities' views and coming up with new ways of doing things, innovating with technology and bringing that to the table, I think they're making a great impact and they'll continue to have more impact. And we're going to see a lot more successes in this area going forward.
No, absolutely. And, I was also very, very active in the startup ecosystem, and I saw healthcare startups were among the top 3 in terms of volumes. Because once a guy sees problems in his college, because that is the time he starts thinking about building a company. So education related startups were one of the top ones. And then people start seeing health related issues around them, in their family, in their society. And then they start solving that because that comes directly to them that why can't this be solved?
Lived experience.
Lived experiences. And I think, I think we will have more and more startups as a startup nation in India on healthcare, solving some of the problems that we discussed today. and I'm sure health organizations would eventually get more and more convinced that working on customer experience and driving better outcomes using technology will yield long-term ROI for them, and they will invest in them as a proper business strategy. So yeah, thank you so much, Bharat, for your time and the wisdom you shared with us. I hope people who are watching this podcast will also benefit from this and see how technology should be adopted, and it must have answered some questions that is in their mind about adoption and usage of technology in healthcare business. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abhishek. Great talking to you. Bye. Thank you.